The massive council chamber of the Stellar Alliance fell silent as the emergency beacons flashed red. Hundreds of representatives from 12 different species sat frozen in their seats, their eyes fixed on the holographic display floating in the center of the room. The peaceful atmosphere that had defined their society for the past 1,000 years shattered in an instant. "Another colony has fallen," announced first speaker Tom, his tall, slender frame rigid with tension. "New Mars is gone, just like the others." The projection showed a peaceful agricultural world transformed into a wasteland. Massive crystal structures jutted from the ground like deadly flowers, their surfaces gleaming with an unnatural purple light. Around them, the once fertile fields had turned to gray ash. No survivors remained. The swarm had struck again. It had started 3 weeks ago. The first attack caught everyone by surprise. The Alliance's advanced defense systems, perfected over centuries, proved useless against the invaders. The swarm's ships, crystalline structures that seemed to grow rather than be built, simply absorbed energy weapons. Their shields operated on principles that defied the Alliance's most brilliant scientists. "How many?" asked Defense Minister Ray, his voice barely a whisper. 2 million colonists, Tom replied, his face grim. None escaped. The chamber erupted in frightened whispers. The Alliance had never faced anything like this before. Their civilization had grown soft, comfortable in their technological superiority. Peace had reigned for so long that most species had forgotten the meaning of true conflict. The swarm showed no interest in communication. Their ships emerged from deep space, their crystal-like structures defying conventional sensors. Analysis suggested they were silicon-based life forms, but beyond that, little was known. They attacked without warning, without mercy, and without apparent purpose beyond destruction. "Our best warships can't even scratch their shields," Ray continued, bringing up tactical data. "Energy weapons are absorbed. Plasma cannons have no effect. Our most advanced AI systems are useless against their control methods." The display shifted to show footage from the latest battle. A fleet of Alliance warships, sleek and powerful, fired brilliant beams of energy at a swarm vessel. The crystalline ship simply absorbed the attacks, growing larger and stronger. Then it responded. Purple lightning arced between Alliance ships, shutting down their systems. They drifted helplessly as crystal growths spread across their hulls, consuming them completely. 3 worlds lost, Tom said, his voice heavy. Millions dead. Our most advanced weapons are useless. Our defenses fail. Our technology, which we were so proud of, means nothing to them. An older council member stood up slowly. Perhaps it's time to consider surrender. To save what lives we can." The suggestion hung heavy in the air. The Alliance had never surrendered to anyone. They had never needed to. Their technology had always protected them, had always been enough. Until now. "No," Tom said firmly. "We must find another way. There must be something we haven't tried. Some approach we haven't considered." At that moment, a junior researcher burst into the chamber, breaking all protocols. The guards moved to stop him, but Tom waved them back. Something in the young one's expression caught his attention. "First speaker," the researcher gasped, out of breath. "We've detected signals, transmissions from an unexplored sector, a species we've overlooked because their technology seemed too primitive to be of interest. We don't have time for." Ray began, but Tom cut him off. "Go on." "They're called humans," the researcher said, excitement breaking through his fear. "They still use projectile weapons, chemical propulsion, kinetic energy weapons, things we abandoned centuries ago as inefficient and crude." The council chamber filled with dismissive murmurs, but Tom leaned forward, suddenly interested. And they've been fighting wars among themselves for their entire history. They never achieved the peace we did. They never abandoned their old weapons even as they developed new ones. They think differently than we do. Tom studied the data pad the researcher handed him. His eyes widened as he read. For the first time since the swarm appeared, A small spark of hope lit in his chest. Sometimes, he thought, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. "Get me a ship," he ordered. "We're going to visit Earth." The Alliance's main command center buzzed with frantic activity as reports of new attacks flooded in. Massive screens covered every wall, each showing another battlefield, another loss, another world falling to the swarm. Defense Minister Ray stood in the center of it all, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. "Sir," an operator called out, "we've lost contact with Blue Colony." Ray closed his eyes briefly. Blue Colony had been home to 5 million people. Their most powerful defense fleet had been stationed there. None of it mattered now. "Show me," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life. The same horrifying scene they'd witnessed too many times before played out again. The swarm's crystalline ships moved like a cloud of glittering death through space. Alliance warships fired their most powerful weapons, but the energy beams simply disappeared into the crystal structures, making them grow larger. "Launch the new prototype weapons," Ray commanded. They had spent the last 2 weeks developing new technology, working around the clock. Surely something had to work. They watched as the Alliance ships launched their latest weapons. Microscopic robots designed to eat through any material, advanced phase shifters meant to bypass shields, even experimental time distortion devices. The swarm didn't even slow down. "Nothing works," the scientist whispered. "It's like they're not even from our universe. Our technology means nothing to them." In the corner of the command center, a group of military strategists huddled around a holographic table. They had run thousands of simulations, tried every tactic in their database. The results were always the same: total defeat. "The death toll has reached 3 billion, an analyst reported, her voice shaking. 15 colonies lost. Refugee ships are overwhelming our remaining worlds." Ray turned to his chief scientist. "What about the quantum disruptors?" "Failed," the scientist replied. "Their shields operate on principles we don't understand. We can't disrupt what we can't comprehend." Just then, First Speaker Tom burst into the command center. He looked different. There was energy in his movements, a spark of hope in his eyes that had been missing for weeks. "I found something," he announced. "Or rather someone." He gestured to the main screen, and it changed to show a new image. A blue and green planet wrapped in white clouds. Earth. "These are humans," Tom explained, bringing up various images. "Look at their military history." The screens filled with scenes that made the Alliance members stare in confusion. Soldiers carrying simple projectile weapons, ships that moved through water, aircraft that still used primitive combustion engines. "What are we looking at?" Ray asked, bewildered. "These are ancient technologies, things we abandoned centuries ago." "Exactly," Tom said excitedly. "They never gave up their old ways. They kept developing everything, new and old together. Look at this." He showed footage of human military exercises, soldiers training with both energy rifles and traditional bullets, ships equipped with both advanced missiles and simple cannons, aircraft that could switch between different propulsion systems. "But how does this help us?" someone asked. "Because the swarm has evolved to counter our type of technology," Tom explained. "Their shields, their defenses, everything is designed to handle energy weapons, plasma, quantum effects. But what about simple kinetic impact? What about chemical reactions? What about the kind of warfare we considered too primitive to be useful?" Ray leaned forward, starting to understand. "You think these humans. I think they might see things we can't," Tom said. "I think their primitive perspective might be exactly what we need. They've spent their entire history fighting, adapting, finding new ways to overcome stronger enemies. The Council will never agree to ask primitives for help," Ray warned. As if to emphasize his point, another alarm blared. Another world had gone dark. "The Council doesn't have a choice anymore," Tom said firmly. "We're losing this war. Our technology has failed us. Our strategies have failed us. We need something different, something the swarm won't expect." He looked around the room, meeting every eye. We need humans. The Alliance diplomatic ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Earth's orbit. First Speaker Tom stood at the viewing window, studying the blue planet below. Behind him, Defense Minister Ray paced nervously. "This is madness," Ray muttered. "Their largest ships can barely reach their own moon. They still burn fossil fuels. How can they possibly help us fight the swarm?" Tom didn't respond immediately. He was watching Earth's primitive detection systems track their arrival. Within minutes, dozens of military satellites had locked onto their position. Primitive missiles were already aimed at them. The humans couldn't hurt their ship, but their speed of response was impressive. "Look how quickly they reacted," Tom said. No discussion. No committee meetings. Just instant defensive action. Their communication system crackled to life. A strong voice came through, speaking in English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Earth-restricted space. Identify yourself immediately or face consequences." Ray snorted. "Face consequences? Their weapons couldn't scratch our paint." "But they're ready to try anyway," Tom pointed out. "That's exactly what we need." He activated the translator and responded to Earth's message. Within hours, they were sitting in a hastily assembled meeting at a place called the United Nations. Military leaders from various human nations had gathered, their faces serious but curious. Tom stood before them, playing the recording of the swarm's attacks. He watched their reactions carefully. Where Alliance members had shown only fear and despair, the humans' eyes narrowed in concentration. They studied the crystal ships with analytical interest. "So your energy weapons are useless against them?" asked General Mark, a gruff-looking man with combat medals on his chest. "Completely," Tom confirmed. "Our most advanced technology simply makes them stronger." The human military leaders exchanged looks. One of them, Admiral Jack, leaned forward. "Those crystal structures," he said thoughtfully. "Have you tried hitting them with kinetic weapons? Good old-fashioned tungsten rods?" Tom blinked. "Kinetic weapons? We haven't used those in centuries." "Sometimes the old ways work best," General Mark said. "You say they absorb energy, but what about physical impact? Vibration? Resonance?" Another officer spoke up. "Those crystal formations look similar to our silicon-based compounds. Have you tried any chemical reactions that might disrupt their molecular structure?" Tom stared at them in amazement. In just minutes, these primitive humans had suggested approaches that the Alliance's best minds hadn't considered in weeks of analysis. "We'd need to modify our ships," Ray admitted reluctantly. "We don't have any kinetic weapon systems anymore." "We do," Admiral Jack said firmly. "And we've got factories that can make more. We might not have fancy space fleets, but we know how to make things go boom." The human leaders began discussing strategies, their voices growing animated. They talked about guerrilla warfare, about hit-and-run tactics, about using the swarm's strengths against them. They thought in ways that would never have occurred to the Alliance's strategists. Tom watched in growing excitement as the humans pulled up their own military records, showing battles where smaller forces had defeated technically superior enemies. They discussed World War I submarine tactics, modern special forces operations, ancient cavalry strategies that could be adapted for space combat. "Your civilization has spent 1,000 years perfecting one type of warfare," General Mark said. "We've spent our history learning every type of warfare. Sometimes, the most advanced solution isn't the best solution." "Will your people agree to help us?" Tom asked. The human leaders looked at each other. Admiral Jack smiled grimly. "Earth has never been united before," he said. "But we've also never faced an alien threat that's killing billions. I think you'll find humans are at their best when things seem hopeless." As if to emphasize his point, alerts started coming in from human military bases worldwide. They were already mobilizing. Factories were switching to war production. Weapons were being loaded onto ships. Scientists were reviewing the data on the swarm, looking for weaknesses. Tom felt hope rising in his chest. These humans didn't waste time with lengthy discussions or political debates. They saw a threat, and they acted. "How soon can you be ready?" he asked. General Mark's answer was simple. "We already are." The Alliance Council chamber was in chaos. Hundreds of representatives shouted over each other as Tom presented his plan to work with humans. The massive screens behind him showed Earth ships being loaded with weapons that most Alliance members considered ancient history. "This is insanity," one council member shouted. "We're going to trust our survival to primitives with gunpowder weapons." Before Tom could respond, the emergency alarms blared again. Everyone fell silent as new images appeared on the screens. The swarm had just destroyed another colony. The death toll was now approaching 4 billion. "We don't have a choice anymore," Tom said quietly. "Watch this." He played a recording from the first human test against a captured piece of swarm crystal. The Alliance members watched as human scientists set up a simple experiment. They used an old device called a jackhammer, something that created strong vibrations at specific frequencies. The crystal, which had resisted every advanced weapon in the Alliance arsenal, shattered in seconds. "Impossible," whispered a senior scientist. "That's not all," Tom continued. He showed another test. This time, humans fired something they called a railgun, a simple weapon that used magnets to launch metal projectiles at extremely high speeds. The swarm's shield technology, which could stop any energy weapon, couldn't react fast enough to stop solid tungsten rods moving at such velocities. "Their shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy," General Mark explained, stepping forward. "But they can't handle good old-fashioned kinetic impact. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution." The council watched in stunned silence as more test results played out. Human chemists had already developed compounds that could eat through the swarm's crystal structures. Their military engineers were adapting old submarine warfare tactics for space combat. Their factories were producing weapons that the swarm had never encountered before. "They think differently than we do," Tom explained. "Where we see one path, they see many. Where we abandoned old technology, they kept improving it alongside the new." Defense Minister Ray, who had been skeptical at first, stepped forward. "I've seen their military training. They're not just fighting with different weapons, they're fighting with different minds. They understand things we've forgotten." The screen showed human special forces training with Alliance troops. The humans were teaching them forgotten arts, how to fight when technology fails, how to adapt, how to think creatively in battle. Alliance soldiers who had relied on advanced targeting systems were learning to aim with their own eyes again. "Humanity has spent its entire history fighting," General Mark said. "Not just with weapons, but with strategy. With cunning. We've learned how to defeat enemies who were stronger than us, better equipped than us. Now we're going to teach the swarm the same lesson." Just then, new alarms sounded. A swarm scout ship had been detected near one of the few remaining Alliance colonies. Everyone tensed, expecting another tragedy. Instead, the screen showed something new. A small fleet of Earth ships, hastily fitted with space engines by Alliance engineers, appeared from behind a moon. They were ugly compared to Alliance vessels. Blocky, primitive-looking things bristling with what looked like ancient weapons. The swarm ship moved to attack, its crystal structure glowing with stolen energy. But this time, something different happened. The human ships didn't fire energy weapons. Instead, they launched salvos of magnetically accelerated tungsten rods, simple pieces of metal, moving at incredible speeds. The swarm's shields, designed to absorb energy, did nothing. The rods smashed through the crystal structure, shattering it into pieces. The entire battle lasted less than a minute. The council chamber erupted in cheers. For the first time since the swarm appeared, they had won a battle. "This is just the beginning," General Mark said firmly. "We're refitting our factories to produce more weapons. Our engineers are working with your scientists to combine our technologies. The swarm thinks it knows all the ways a war can be fought. We're going to show them how wrong they are." Tom looked around at the council members. Their doubt had turned to hope. Sometimes, he thought, you had to go backward to move forward. All in favor of full military alliance with Earth? He asked. Every hand in the chamber went up. The massive war room inside the combined Human Alliance Command Center buzzed with activity. Screens showed hundreds of ships being modified across Earth and the remaining Alliance worlds. What had started as a desperate gamble was turning into the largest military operation in galactic history. Status report, General Mark called out, standing before a giant holographic display showing fleet positions. Admiral Jack stepped forward. Earth's factories are running at full capacity. We've modified 50 Alliance battleships with kinetic weapon systems. Their energy cannons have been replaced with railguns and mass drivers. The old ways, Tom mused, watching human engineers teach Alliance crews how to operate what they had once considered primitive weapons. Who would have thought they'd be our salvation? The main screen showed their latest victory. A squadron of modified ships had engaged 3 swarm vessels. The battle lasted only minutes. The crystalline ships, which had seemed unstoppable just weeks ago, shattered under the impact of accelerated tungsten rods and specialized chemical warheads. We've lost too much already, Ray said grimly. But at least now we can fight back. A young human scientist rushed into the room, her eyes bright with excitement. General, the new ammunition tests are complete. She pulled up the test results on the main display. The human scientists had developed something they called resonance rounds, special bullets that would vibrate at exactly the right frequency to shatter the swarm's crystal structures. Simple physics, she explained, like an opera singer breaking a glass with the right note. Sometimes the old principles work better than advanced technology. The Alliance members watched in amazement as the test footage played. The new rounds didn't just damage the swarm's material, they caused chain reactions that made entire sections collapse. How soon can we begin mass production? General Mark asked. The factories are already retooling, she replied. We're keeping it low-tech. These can be manufactured anywhere, even on colony worlds with basic industrial capability. That was another thing the Alliance was learning from humans. The value of simple, reliable technology that could be easily replaced and repaired. Their own advanced weapons had been wonderfully powerful, but when they failed, only specialized facilities could fix them. The command center's attention shifted to another screen showing ground combat training. Human special forces were teaching Alliance soldiers how to fight without relying on advanced targeting systems and powered armor. The lessons were brutal but effective. The swarm thought they could disable our technology and leave us helpless, an instructor was saying. But a human with a rifle and proper training is never helpless. Tom watched as Alliance soldiers learned to shoot with iron sights, to move silently without stealth fields, to fight with their hands and simple weapons. They were rediscovering skills their species had forgotten centuries ago. The counterattack begins tomorrow, General Mark announced. Operation Thravac. The name was fitting. They were throwing back to older, simpler ways of warfare, ways the swarm had never encountered and couldn't adapt to. The holographic display showed their battle plan. The new combined fleet would strike at 3 swarm-controlled worlds simultaneously. Human tactics, Alliance speed, and weapons that bridged both their technologies. They won't expect this, Admiral Jack said confidently. Their entire strategy is based on absorbing and corrupting advanced technology. They've never faced an enemy that fights like we do. A buzz of excitement filled the room as final preparations were made. Alliance ships were taking up formation alongside Earth vessels. The ugly but effective hybrid weapons were loaded and ready. Ground forces prepared for planetary assault, carrying both high-tech and primitive weapons. 5 centuries of peace made us forget something important, Tom said quietly to General Mark. Something your people never forgot. What's that? The general asked. That the most dangerous weapon isn't the most advanced one, Tom replied. It's the one your enemy doesn't expect and can't counter. The final launch orders were given. Across Earth and the Alliance worlds, the greatest fleet ever assembled prepared for battle. They carried humanity's oldest weapons alongside the Alliance's fastest ships. They were about to teach the Swarm a lesson about underestimating primitive technology. Operation Throwback was about to begin. The battle for New Mars began at dawn, Earth time. The combined Human Alliance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of the system. General Mark stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as hundreds of ships took up formation. The fleet was an odd mix. Sleek Alliance vessels now bristling with primitive human weapons, alongside Earth's bulky but powerful warships. Swarm forces detected, called out a sensor operator. 5 crystal ships, heading our way. Once, that announcement would have caused panic. Now the bridge crew remained calm. They had learned that the Swarm wasn't invincible. They just needed to be fought differently. Remember the plan. Admiral Jack's voice came over the command channel. Fight like humans. No fancy maneuvers. No advanced targeting systems. Basic formations. Maximum impact. The Swarm ships approached, their crystal structures glowing with stolen energy from previous battles. They moved with the same arrogant confidence that had marked their earlier victories, clearly expecting this battle to end like all the others. They were wrong. All ships, execute Battle Plan Thunder, General Mark ordered, using the human design strategy. The fleet split into 3 groups, moving in simple patterns that would have seemed primitive to the Alliance a few months ago. The Swarm ships fired their energy weapons, expecting to absorb and grow stronger from the return fire. Instead, the human-modified ships launched their first attack. Hundreds of magnetically accelerated tungsten rods streaked across space. The Swarm's energy shields, designed to absorb and redirect advanced weapons, did nothing to stop the simple kinetic impacts. The first crystal ship shattered like glass. Direct hits. Someone shouted. Their shields are useless against physical impacts. The Swarm ships tried to adapt, their crystalline structures shifting and changing. But they had never faced this type of warfare before. As they struggled to counter the kinetic weapons, the fleet launched its second wave. The new resonance torpedoes. The weapons looked simple, just metal shells filled with precisely calibrated vibration devices. But when they struck, the results were devastating. The Swarm's crystal structures began to vibrate, then crack, then completely fall apart. This is Admiral Jack to all ground forces, the radio crackled. Begin landing operations. Dropships shrieked toward the surface of New Mars. Inside them, human and Alliance soldiers checked their weapons. Everything from advanced plasma rifles to simple shotguns loaded with crystal-shattering shells. The Swarm had controlled this world for months. They had turned its surface into a forest of crystal growths, using the planet's resources to build more ships. They had never faced a ground assault. No one had been crazy enough to try one before humans joined the war. Remember your training, shouted a human sergeant as the dropships landed. Simple weapons, simple tactics. Hit them hard, hit them fast. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. Human soldiers, using combat techniques perfected over thousands of years of warfare, led the charge. They taught the Alliance troops how to take cover, how to advance under fire, how to fight when technology failed. The Swarm's ground forces, like their ships, had no defense against primitive human tactics. Their crystal armor shattered under shotgun blasts. Their control systems couldn't track soldiers who knew how to move stealthily without technology. Their strategies fell apart against enemies who could fight effectively with nothing but simple weapons and brutal determination. By sunset, New Mars was free. The crystal forests lay in ruins, shattered by human-designed explosives and old-fashioned combat techniques. In orbit, the remaining Swarm ships fled, their confidence broken by weapons they couldn't absorb or counter. "This is just the beginning," General Mark said, watching the cleanup begin. "We've proven they can be beaten. Now we take the fight to their home territory." Tom nodded. The Alliance had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Sometimes you had to go backward to move forward. "Send word to all fleets," he ordered. "Operation Throwback continues. We're taking back our worlds." Across the galaxy, the word spread. The swarm could be beaten. Humanity had shown the way. The counterattack had begun. 3 months after the Battle of New Mars, the combined Human Alliance fleet approached the heart of swarm territory. Nearly 1,000 ships moved in formation, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. At its core were Earth's converted battleships, bristling with the primitive weapons that had changed the course of the war. "This is it," General Mark said, standing on the bridge of the flagship. "Their home system. The source of it all." The tactical display showed their target, a massive crystal structure that encompassed an entire planet. This was where the swarm had originated, where they built their ships, where they had planned their campaign of destruction that had cost billions of lives. "All ships report ready," Admiral Jack announced. "The ground forces are prepared for the final assault." The swarm must have realized this was coming. Their remaining ships formed a defensive barrier around their homeworld. Dozens of crystal vessels glowing with stolen energy. Behind them, the crystalline surface of their planet bristled with defensive weapons. "They think they're ready for us," Tom observed. "Just like they thought they were ready at New Mars." "Send the first wave," General Mark ordered. The human-designed attack began with something the swarm had never encountered before: nuclear weapons. Not the advanced fusion bombs of the Alliance, but simple, brutal atomic devices that humanity had kept in their arsenals for centuries. The massive explosions didn't just damage the swarm's ships. They created electromagnetic pulses that disrupted their control systems. As their formations fell into chaos, the main fleet attacked with now familiar human tactics. Railguns fired their tungsten rods. Resonance torpedoes struck with devastating accuracy. Simple kinetic weapons proved once again that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "Their outer defenses are breaking," someone shouted. "We've got a clear path to the surface." The ground assault began. Dropships carrying human and Alliance soldiers descended through the atmosphere. They carried weapons ranging from advanced plasma rifles to simple explosive charges. After months of fighting together, the two forces had learned to combine their strengths: Alliance speed and technology with human determination and adaptability. "Remember," a human sergeant told his mixed unit of human and alien soldiers, "they don't understand our way of fighting. Use that against them. Fight smart. Fight simple. Fight to win." The battle for the surface was fierce but decisive. The swarm, for all their advanced technology, had never developed defenses against determined soldiers fighting with simple weapons and clever tactics. Their crystal structures shattered under explosive charges. Their control centers fell to teams using basic infiltration techniques that hadn't changed in centuries. In orbit, the space battle reached its climax. The remaining swarm ships found themselves caught in a trap designed by human naval strategists, tactics adapted from ancient sea warfare that worked just as well in space. "Final phase," General Mark ordered. "Launch the planet crackers." These were perhaps the simplest weapons of all. Massive chunks of metal, accelerated to incredible speeds by human-designed mass drivers. The kinetic energy of their impact would do what no energy weapon could achieve: crack the swarm's planetary shell. The impacts were visible from space. Huge fissures appeared in the crystalline surface. The swarm's entire civilization began to break apart, unable to adapt to this primitive but devastating attack. "They're surrendering," Tom announced in amazement. "They're actually surrendering." The signal was clear. The swarm, faced with an enemy they couldn't predict or counter, chose survival over extinction. Their remaining ships powered down. Their surface structures went dark. Hours later, in the Alliance Council chamber, General Mark stood before representatives of all species, including the now subdued swarm. "We won this war," he said, "not because we had better technology, but because we remembered that technology isn't everything. Humanity never forgot the old ways of fighting, the simple truths of combat, the value of keeping all your options open." Tom stepped forward. From this day forward, the Alliance will never again dismiss any species as primitive. We will never forget that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions, and we will always remember that it was humanity, the species we once thought too primitive to notice, that saved us all. The chamber erupted in cheers. The war was over. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had proved that being advanced didn't always mean being the best. Sometimes being primitive was exactly what you needed to be.